So Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14. And I've called this the Sign of Emmanuel. And the songs that we've sung and the testimonies we've heard so far fit in, as they always do on a Sunday morning, with the overall theme, though we don't necessarily plan it that way. It seems as if God has a purpose in, there's something I want to say this morning. And the crux of the issue is, can we trust God in critical crises? Will we trust God in the eye of the storm? And the sign of Emmanuel was given to King Ahaz. But the issue is, this sign was given not because he trusted God. In fact, he chose not to trust God. I won't. And God said, in the face of your unbelief, I'm going to give you a sign. It's not that Ahaz, the king of Judah, which was a southern kingdom at that time, it's not that he couldn't trust God. I haven't got enough faith, I can't rise to that heights. Actually, the position he adopted is, I don't want to trust God, because I've sorted it out myself. Thank you very much. And it's interesting, when you read this very famous verse, it's one that people quote, but usually don't understand. Now here, I'm going to make a fool of myself and say something which everybody says, oh yes. But I was thinking of an illustration, like most people can quote Einstein's theory, E equals mc squared. I can quote it. Personally, I don't know what it means. I know it's meant to be part of how the universe holds together. So I quote the phrase, but what it means. And people quote this verse, a virgin shall be with child and be given the name Emmanuel. They really don't understand what that was all about in those days. In fact, we take it and say, oh, that's so nice. What a sweet thing of God to do. A child will be born to a virgin and he'll be the name Emmanuel, and we get the nativity scene and Mary and Joseph and Jesus, who is Emmanuel, say, oh, it's so sweet and, cherub-like. Actually, the sign that God gave to Ahaz these hundreds of years before Jesus was born was, a child will be born, but before that child has reached the age of being a teenager, trouble will come to the land. And the sign is actually a sign of impending judgment. Emmanuel, God with us, there's trouble ahead. So we need to, and really you do need to, if you don't know the Old Testament, that's why we need to read the whole Bible to make sense of the New Testament. If you don't know the Old Testament, I'm just going to take a snapshot out of it, but you do need to follow this through, because Ahaz was king of Judah, which was a southern kingdom. In the land Judah was a southern kingdom, Israel was a northern kingdom, and Ahaz is the king of Judah. But hovering on the outskirts, there's a mighty nation called the Assyrians, and I've depicted them here. These are the black chest people here, and they are threatening trouble. And over on this side, with only a few pieces, we've got a joint group between Aram, which I'm going to call Syria because it became Syria, between Syria and Israel. And they're being threatened by Assyria. But the trouble is, this chess game isn't a game of two sides, it's a game of three sides. There's another party involved. What Syria and Israel want is for Ahaz, who is the king of Judah, they want him to join them. But he won't. So they are threatening to come and invade him and get rid of the king and put in their own king who will join with them. Ahaz is a bit frightened about this, so he has a plan. Instead of going to this side, what does he do? He goes to the other side. He goes and says, hey, Assyria's threatening us. I'll go and join the Assyrians. That'll be my protection against Israel and Syria. Actually, what he does, he robs the temple of Jerusalem of a lot of its treasure and sends that as a sort of a, I'll give you some money to help us. And he sends the temple treasure to the Assyrians. And then on a visit, he notices that up north they have a different type of altar. Oh, he said, I like the style of that altar. And against all the rules and regulations, against all the teaching, he says, I think I'll copy that. And so the king of Judah copies this other altar, takes it into the temple of Jerusalem, demolishes that, and says, we'll have this altar that I've made. Now, if you know the Old Testament, the whole thing was structured because it was a copy of what was in heaven. And the King Ahaz, king of Judah, has replaced the altar in Jerusalem. And it says, now you get on and do your services with the altar that I designed. This man, King Ahaz, is in trouble. He's threatened by the Assyrians. He's threatened by Israel and Syria. He doesn't know what to do. The truth is, he is not in a position to hear what God is saying. In fact, he's not a good king at all. He involves himself in child sacrifice. He is not a godly king. And into this situation walks the prophet Isaiah. Into this crisis. So, chapter 7, verse 2. The house of David was told, Aram has allied itself with Ephraim, that's Syria and Israel. So the hearts of Ahaz's and people were shaken, as the trees of the forest are shaken by the wind. Then the Lord said to Isaiah, go out, you and your son, to meet Ahaz at the end of the aqueduct, of the upper pool. What he's doing, what people think he's doing, is he's preparing for a siege. Jerusalem doesn't have its own water supply. They have to bring water into the city. And he's just preparing for a siege. What is going to happen with all this conflict going around? Isaiah comes to meet him at the end of the aqueduct. And the word of the Lord is to him, say to him, be careful, keep calm, and don't be afraid. One of my many presents from Christmases ago, but we're very familiar with the keep calm thing. It says here, keep calm and carry on. Well, I can adapt that. Isaiah was saying to Ahaz, just keep calm and keep on in the faith. Don't panic. Don't quote it. Be careful, keep calm, don't be afraid. Isaiah, the prophet, is saying to the king, if you continue in the faith of your forefathers, in the faith that belongs to this nation, things will be all right. Now, you might need to do something. In fact, at times you might need not to do anything. But what you need to do is not panic. Let me just pause there to say that for many of us, that's an experience from our own life. We come into situations and we feel a bit overwhelmed by the circumstances round about. And so often the Lord has to say to us, just keep calm. Just keep calm. I've said it before, I go to Whitehall Prison regularly. And it's true, every time I go through that gate, I have a sense of apprehension. Not because I don't feel competent, but you're never sure what you're gonna, how things are going to go. And every time I'm not sure I want to be doing this, and every time I think, oh, that was so good. Let me take as an example the concert that Jacob put on last night. So when he first proposed it, I thought, well, knowing the character of Wisbech, I wonder how many people will turn up. I don't know if you felt that, Jacob? I did at times. A bit apprehensive. Is this going to work? And particularly when you're actually in it. So he'd asked me to play the piano, and the first bit we're going to play, I forgot the introduction. So Jacob is there conducting away, and I'm playing the wrong bit. The violins forgot it as well. That's very good. You think, oh, what's going on here? And then when we were doing the gypsy music in Kalinka, we were playing it, and Anna was saying, "Clive, I've never seen you look so concentrated." Well, playing by yourself is one thing. Playing in a group is quite another discipline. And so we're playing away, and this piece of music gets faster and faster. We've done the first page, go to play the second page, it's the wrong music! But if you ever have put something on, if ever you've tried to engage in Christian ministry, there is that sense, what's happening here? What's going on? And all you can do is do what you're meant to do, and keep going, and put faith in God. Let me refer to Jeff Lucas. So I did the £20 deal last week, so I got this book free. But Jeff Lucas, who was speaking here last Sunday evening, it's his own words. He says, "I'm actually quite a gifted idiot." That's what he says of himself. And he says in his introduction, "I speak as someone who loves God but messes up life constantly. I fall asleep when I pray, and occasionally when I wake up in the morning, I wonder if it's all real." Yeah. Sometimes that's how we feel. I've been known to shout at my kids and say unkind words to my wife. I'm a Christian, but I'm not terribly good at it. And when we heard him speaking last night, he's such a capable public speaker. I can say this, before the meeting, the event started last night, he was very nervous, he was very apprehensive. And now that we've heard the report, he's never done an event like that before. And so we think, he's been doing this for years. Actually, inside, he's saying, "I'm not sure if this is going to work." And he's saying that to me before the meeting. What on earth is going on here? And what God says to us, when we seem a bit overwhelmed, when the storm comes in, when the flood comes in, God is saying, keep calm, be careful, keep calm, don't be afraid. Be careful is the first word. Be careful to hold on to that faith. Don't let go because it's getting hard. Be careful and keep calm. Keep the peace of God ruling in your heart. Don't let the events around you overwhelm and distort your perspective, because we find, well, it's our own experience, when we're in the midst of the storm, we think that's how life is. But it isn't. God is greater than that. Be careful, keep calm, don't be afraid. And what he says to the king, at the end of verse 9, if you do not stand firm in your faith, you will not stand at all. So all you've got to do is hold on to the faith that God is God, you're the king that's meant to be bringing my rule to bear into this nation, stand firm in that, and you'll be all right. The proviso is, if you don't stand firm in your faith, you won't stand at all. And now Isaiah says to Ahaz, and just to give you some confidence that this word is from God, you can ask for any kind of sign you want. A sign in heaven, a sign on earth. Ask for anything. What a word from God. You can ask for anything. However outrageous, however incredible, ask God to do that as a sign that you'll know what I'm saying is from God. And then Ahaz says, in a very pseudo-pious way, I'll not do that. I'll not ask God for a sign. I'll not put the Lord to the test. He's not asking you to put you into the test. He's just asking you, just ask for a sign of confirmation that this word is from the Lord. Oh no, we don't do that. And do you know why he didn't do that? Because he already decided in his heart how he was going to handle the situation. And he doesn't want God to intervene and change his mind and change it. Actually, I've got these threatening me, I'm going to go with Assyria. Isaiah's response is that, well, he's speaking about God. He's a bit narked off about it all. I've just given you a blank check. You can ask for anything. And Isaiah says in response to Ahaz's sign, is it not enough to try the patience of men? Will you now try the patience of my God? What on earth are you playing at? You can have anything. oh no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to ask God to intervene. Now you are testing God by your very refusal. Then comes verse 14. Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. The virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son and will call him Emmanuel. So this sign that comes is in responses to Ahaz's position. No, I don't want anything from God. Okay? If you don't want anything from God, God is going to do something anyway, despite that position you've adopted. Now I know, and I'm not going to go through all the arguments, I know there's a lot of controversy about that word in verse 14, the virgin will be the child. The editors of the New International Version have come down on the side of keeping that as a virgin. Some say a young woman, because they don't quite like the connotation of virgin. And how all this was fulfilled, it's a bit puzzling. People have tried to work out who was the mother and who was the child. Been lots of suggestions, but just give it. Some say it was Ahaz's wife and he had a son, but that doesn't work out because Hezekiah was born already. Some people say, well, it was Isaiah and his wife and had a son. Some people say, well, it's not actually a woman and a child. It's the virgin nation of Israel who will produce faithful people and God will be with them. And they're trying to work out. And people haven't been able to identify who is this child in Ahaz's time that was a sign. One, I think, very astute commentator has said, perhaps this is a fulfillment of what Patrick preached on some weeks ago in Isaiah chapter 6, that the people will be hearing but never understanding, they'll be seeing but they'll never see. God has done something in your land and you were blind, you didn't see it. So no wonder it's obscured, that people that time couldn't understand what God was doing. The fact is, and we know from the gospel narrative, that Matthew takes that verse and says, actually, the sign in all its fulfillment was when Jesus was born. This is in fulfillment of that prophecy, that a virgin shall have a child, and his name will be called Jesus, God with us. But in Isaiah's day, I believe a child was born. And for those who had eyes to see and ears to hear, they said, actually, this is from God. But the majority of people missed it. But the sign is more than, oh, there's a child, just been born. The sign goes on, because he says he will eat curds and honey when he knows enough to reject the right and choose the wrong. But before the boy knows enough to reject the wrong and choose the right, the land of the two kings you dread will be laid to waste. So this child is growing up, and you've been afraid of Syria and Israel. In a few years, they're going to be stubbed out like cigarette ends. That's what they're going to be like. Because it's only men. What are you afraid of? And you're meant to have faith in God. And that's a word for Israel and Syria, but also it's a word for Judah. Because not only are these two threatening nations going to be eliminated, actually Ahaz, your own kingdom, will be devastated. And the sign is that God came and you didn't know the day of his visitation. The picture I had just thinking about this is change it from chess to 10-pin bowling. Ahaz is there, standing as one of the pins. And there's this ball coming down the alley, threatening to knock him over. And extraordinarily, God says, Ahaz, all you've got to do is stand firm and you'll survive that. And that's incredible. Because these are warring nations. And God is saying, just, can you get hold of this? Just stand firm, and this threat, which seems to, you'll be okay, you'll come through it. Now, I've been struck by the destiny of a nation hinged on Ahaz's decision. The Assyrian invasion, the exile, need not have happened if there had been men, leaders, governors in the land who would hold on. Faith in God. As it was, God dealt with Israel and Syria, and God dealt with Judah. And God allowed the Assyrians to come in. Because God says, verse 18, in the day the Lord whistles for flies from the distant streams of Egypt and for bees from the land of Assyria. Nation, I'm going to discipline you, I'm going to bring some judgment, you're going to learn a lesson from this. But it's not the end of the story. It's not that they're all wiped off the board. Because he was told when he went to meet Ahaz, take your son, I can never say these words, Shear Jashub, is that how you say it? I don't know, make your own mind up. But his name means a remnant will return. This is going to happen, but God is going to preserve people who have faith in him through very catastrophic situation. What this word is saying is, Ahaz, you don't want a sign. You don't want me to intervene. You don't want my counsel. You don't want to learn my ways. So you're not asking for a sign. But Ahaz, I'm going to give you a sign. And the sign will prove that I'm still God, whether you believe it or not. And please just get hold of this. What we believe or what we choose not to believe never alters what truly is. And if you don't believe God is in control, God steps out. I'll leave you to it. Or however much you screw up your faith in, I believe. Does that change the character of God? Of course not. What we believe or what we choose not to believe doesn't change who God is. But the position we adopt is that I'm going to stand in the place of faith. I can take hold of all the grace, all the virtue, all the counsel, all the wisdom of God and bring that into my situation and let him be God. That's the sign of Emmanuel. Let me conclude by just bringing it to bear on the birth of Jesus. I'll just move these round so I get this right. So we do take this sign as a sign fulfilled in the birth of Jesus, a virgin, and we believe in the virgin birth. We don't believe Joseph. Some Christian maybe will say, perhaps they got married. Before they got married, they didn't come together. As people say, no. It was by the seed of the Holy Spirit. But what God did in that generation, well, let me take the words of Jesus. When he's grown up and begun his public ministry, he describes his generation as harassed and helpless. They're running around like headless chickens. They don't know what to do. And he said, how often will I gather you? But you just go off and do your own stuff. He describes his people as a faithless generation. When Jesus came, most people weren't saying, oh God, where are you? Please come. They could identify a few people in the temple who were waiting for God's rescue plan. Most people were just carrying on, doing their own thing. Jesus called it a perverse and unbelieving generation. And into that world God sent his son. We need to get hold of that when we look at the nativity scene. It isn't what everybody will say, oh, God has been so good, he's done this amazing thing, let's all go to Bethlehem and see that. Most people didn't know what it has. And when he grew up, he came to his own, and his own received him not. They just didn't want him. And God was manifest, and most people didn't want him involved. It was an obscure sign. That's a strange thing, isn't it? When God does this, and his only son is born of Mary and placed in the manger, why didn't you tell the world? Except for a few shepherds and the innkeeper and then these men from the east. And then it goes into obscurity. You see, both the cradle and the cross are examples of God's foolishness and him being displayed in weakness. And the Bible says people don't want that kind of sign. I don't want a baby. I don't want a crucified Saviour. If I was to ask for a sign from heaven, it certainly wouldn't be that. If you could ask me for any sign, well, actually, here's a little baby. That's it. Ask me for a sign. Here's a dead man on a cross. Is that it? And if I'm looking to God, I'm not sure I want that sort of message from God. Actually, I think I could come up with a better plan. I could do it differently, just as Ahaz. And the sign, when we look at the nativity scene, I think maybe Patrick, somebody the other week quoted it. Maybe it was in the men's Bible study. We forget that word that Simeon gave when Jesus was presented at 8 days old. He says, this child will be fully falling of many. Many people are going to stumble. They're going to fall over this child. God has come. And yet, well, Jesus himself says, for judgment I came into the world. For judgment. That the blind would see. Now, he's just healed a blind man, so there's that connotation. So that the blind would see, but also spiritually, people could have their eyes opened by the light of the world that has come in. And now things have to be judged, assessed in the light of that revelation. But for people who claim to say, we know, we can see, we understand how things are, we know what life is about, we know where it came from, we know where it's going to. It came, well, by chance, and it's going into oblivion. We know, we've got all the answers. Those who can see, he says, you're going to be made blind. Your wisdom is going to be proved as foolishness. Now, Jesus himself says, I didn't come as a judge. He will come the second time as a judge. He says, I'm not coming as a... But his coming itself is the judgment. You need to get hold of that. He doesn't come to condemn, but in the fact that God has now come and made his last statement, his last pronouncement to the world in the person of Jesus Christ, that is the judgment. Now people have to decide, is this God? They have to choose. Is this what God has done to rescue the world? And people say, well, I can't see. I don't understand it. Actually, if you want to see, you can. But those who claim to see, they're made blind. And he is, Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. This is the sign. This is your God. So the question, when he's on trial, said, shall we crucify, I'm going to change the word slightly, shall we crucify your king, is what was said. But to the people, he's in fact saying, shall we crucify your God? Shall we crucify your God? Because this is God with us. And this is, and your response is, away with him. But the good news is, to all who received him, to everyone who said, yes, this is God with us, to all who received him, he gave power to become children of God. So Simeon's word was not also that it would cause the falling of many. What else would it do? It would cause the rising of many. That we will be raised up as sons and daughters of God, inheritors of the whole kingdom, eternal life, forgiveness of sins, everything that the package includes. But that's to all who received him, who say, yes, I believe that you are Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God. That's the sign of Emmanuel. Let's get rid of the tinsel and the cherubs and all that sort of thing. It is God's pronouncement to the world. And it brings judgment as well as it brings life. I want to finish with a story. I'll put my phone there, and Tim hasn't phoned me, because I tried to get in touch with him to permission to use this story. but he's not phoned, so I said, Tim, if you don't phone, I'm going to use the story anyway. Because the message is that we're to live by this faith. I've scribbled a note here. In life, and we've heard that already, in life, stuff happens that will make us afraid. Stuff will happen which will feel overwhelming. I'm a pawn in this game and I don't know where it's going. And it's not that I never feel afraid, but I don't need to allow that to rule me. And I'm trying to think of a nice story to finish with. So Tim is married to Izzy. They've been married a few years, they've got a little boy now. But before they went out, so it's boyfriend and girlfriend, and it wasn't a casual relationship, they were seriously looking for life partners. And Tim had told us about this girl who was amazing. She's a good musician, she said, she repairs my clothes, she's very artistic, we've got a good sense of humour, he liked her very much. But, they were friendly. So they developed this friendship. And then Izzy went back to Manchester for some time, and with the intention of thinking, well, I need to think and pray and talk to my parents about this relationship. Is it one where we think will lead somewhere? So she went back to Manchester. Tim's living in Sheffield. Then eventually Izzy comes back, phones up Tim and says, can we meet? And his heart sinks. This is the call I've been dreading. She's going to phone me and say, let's just keep this friendship, back off, don't chase it anymore. So I said, can we meet in the pub? So we went down, sat in the pub, so they're having a drink together, talk about everything. So then Izzy says, shall we talk about us? And he thought, oh no, it's that moment, And then she says, they weren't getting engaged, but she said, yeah, we'll go out. His life was transformed in that moment. Absolutely transformed. It was so late in the evening, he went back to his digs. There was nobody else around over there. He stayed up all night. Never could cook it. He was on a high. Because girl of his dreams to say, yeah. So we were away. My sister's in Hereford. My mother had just been taken into a home. And at 7 o'clock in the morning, Tim phones us, because we're the first people he can speak to. He's been up all night, he's got to the outskirts of Sheffield, he's sitting on a hill, overlooking the hill, watching the sunrise, and he's saying, she said yes! Oh! Now, I use that story, but have you ever been in situations where you think the worst is going to happen? You think, I'm dreading what's going to come. But you've got to go through it. But what God is calling us to, what's he calling us to? Be careful. Keep calm. Don't be afraid. If you stand firm in your faith, now, that's a good ending, but in some instances, actually the outcome is very sorrowful, very painful. But in that, is God still God? When things don't go the way that you want to. Do we just have that confidence that the peace of God is ruling in my life? Because in Him, God has come. And He's not living in a nation in the Old Testament. He's not actually in a manger in Bethlehem. God is in me. So we're going to share in communion together, because this is another sign of actually receiving Him. Just inviting Him to be Lord and Saviour in our life again. And it's a commitment in faith. And you might need to just take the circumstances you're in, say, God, in this, where I'm not sure how all the pressure points are going to work out, God, I renew my faith in you, that my life is safe in your hands. My life is safe in your hands. That you are good, that you are God, and that you live in my life.